Good afternoon. My name is James Deitch, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Joint Intelligence Bureau, a little-known entity of the British government that dealt with intelligence gathering from 1946 to 1964 when it was folded into the Joint Intelligence Committee. When I learned about this project, I became very interested in it. My background is I've got a master's degree in military history from Norwich University. I am a retired Marine Corps, having spent most of my career in logistics. I had the opportunity during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, as well as Operation Teamwork in Norway, to serve alongside British military forces, as well as allied forces from around the world. And in the last year and a half, I was very heavily involved in a work with Colonel Michael Krause. Dr. Krause is an alumni of Norwich University like myself, earned his PhD in 1968 from Georgetown University. He is in the process of turning his work into a manuscript, hopefully to be published here soon. I was the research assistant on that project, looking at causation for World War I, primarily studying British diplomacy. So it was a natural extension for me to take an interest in British intelligence as part of this class on modern Great Britain, taking a look at the evolution of their intelligence apparatus post World War I, and then also seeing how that interacted with the Allies, evolved, and particularly in trying to understand the relationship of British intelligence to some of the larger issues that the United States had to deal with in the 20th century um, prior to the Vietnam War, in particular the Berlin crisis and the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so I wanted to understand, because the Joint Intelligence Bureau seemed to abruptly stop in 1964, and we saw a lot of these major issues dealing with the Cold War and potential interactions with the Soviet Union. Was there some type of failure that historians had failed to examine and look at with the folding of the Joint Intelligence Bureau and its evolution into the Joint Intelligence Committee? So that's a fair question, a fair argument, but challenging, because an individual by the name of Hugh Dillon from King's College had written his PhD dissertation on that very subject. And so we want to take a long, hard look at Dr. Dillon's work, as well as Michael Goodman, also at King's College, and Richard Aldrich, who is a very renowned professor and doctor at Warwick University, specializing in diplomatic and political history with a focus on espionage. And so I looked at those three individuals very heavily at their historiography. The problem with the primary sources, although they are readily digitized at this point, is that the sourcing was heavily contaminated, was stored in basements for a long period of time, uh, had a lot of asbestos contamination in it. And so, in all disclosure, Dr. Dillon did a lot of the heavy lifting for most historians when it comes to looking at the primary sources. I did have an opportunity to look at the digitized versions of that, and then relied on cross-referencing Dr. Dillon's work, as well as some pretty good reviews by Dr. Goodman of Dr. Dillon's work as well. But we are very fortunate to have a number of sources available to us, primary sources, from General Kenneth Strong, who is really the key factor in this entire story. He's the main character of the story, having served on General Eisenhower's staff as part of the buildup to D-Day. He became a very trusted advisor to General Eisenhower and a critical person in the story of British intelligence at that time. After the Allies had successfully beaten the Axis powers during World War II, a new threat emerged, and that was the Soviet Union and China. And so the Joint Intelligence Bureau was staffed on collecting information with them around the world. And they did this in an alliance with the Five Eyes, which is New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the United States, and Great Britain, um, uniquely positioning themselves as an alliance for intelligence. And what makes an Anglo-Spear alliance so unusual is it's of course made up of people that are from the Anglo-Spear. And so while they were overcoming language barriers rather easily with themselves. It required that they have a great amount of resources to understand language and culture throughout the world to be able to challenge that Soviet and communist threat. So some great challenges there. The Cuban Missile Crisis and the Berlin crisis quickly turned into a political field day for the American administration. Kennedy was being challenged as to whether he was strong enough. And so there was a little bit of strong arming on the part of the American intelligence apparatus to push on both of those fronts. And so my question was, did that somehow impede British intelligence? It absolutely did not. And Dr. Dillon did a strong case of presenting that. Instead, it became an even stronger alliance, evolving into a position where they were able to share information more readily amongst agencies, developed it into the Joint Intelligence Committee, the Defense Intelligence Staff, and that enjoyment, that relationship that the Five Eyes nations, but in particular the United States and Great Britain, enjoy to this day, and have been able to collaborate successfully not only in the Cold War against the Soviet threats, but continuing on with the war on terror afterwards. So the further study that I would suggest still needs to be done is to look at how that evolution of the relationship between the Anglosphere nations, particularly Great Britain and the United States, evolved and pivoted at the end of the Cold War as it shifted toward the war on terror, and what will that look like going forward? These are all great questions that will allow us to continue to explore and build on the historiography that Dr. Goodman, Dr. Dillon, and Dr. Aldrich have left us with. Hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I thank you for listening to me today.